Brian, thank you for coming in.
You're so welcome.
Appreciate you taking the time this evening to be with me. What I thought we could do is sit down and have a conversation as the election is less than a week away.
It's coming up.
You've been out campaigning, as have the other candidates. I'm sure you're hearing from voters. I'm curious what you're hearing from them about what are the...
Get us a lower electric rate.
Yeah, is that the issue on
That's
the
it. That's it. Fix the lagoon after you fix the electric rate.
What do they expect the city to do to lower the electric? You mean close the deal?
Close the deal.
So what do you see the council's discretion going forward in closing the deal?
I think they ought to close the deal. I think they can close the deal. I think they can close the deal tomorrow morning if they wanted to. And they don't. And you'll have to ask the council members why they refuse to do it.
What is the council not doing then to close?
Close the deal. Give them the keys. Let's do the deal. Give us 60% of the money. We'll give you 60% of the customers. We'll deed them over to you. And we'll give you the keys. You operate the plant in the same manner that OUC now operates the plant. OUC gives us direction. We do what OUC tells us to do. Instead of OUC telling us what to do, FPL could tell us what to do, and we would have, and turn over the accounting, it's an accounting function, turn over the accounting to FPL, let them charge FPL rates. Technically, the city would still be a utility until such time as all of the agreements were signed, sealed, and delivered, at which point you can change the deed, you can change the title, whatever. But FPL could operate, could be the operating partner, if you will. They could be the one calling the shots, and they could do that starting December 1st.
Are you speaking of a partial sale?
Well, it looks very much like a partial sale, because immediately 60% would be deeded over to FPL, but we would continue to go forward and continue to pursue whatever regulatory authorities, whatever they have for us to do, whatever hoops they have for us to jump through, we can finish that up. And that's the balance of 40%. And then both sides are showing good faith. FP&L is showing good faith by depositing 60% of the money. We're showing good faith by deeding over 60% of the customers. And you know, in that way, the county customers, their complaint ends December 1st, 30 days from now. And can you do that? Of course you can do it. If you want to, if you have the will to do it.
How would FMPA approval play into that?
FMPA approval doesn't come into play because Vero Beach is still an electric utility. We're still an electric utility until we get all of the approvals. Then we can deed that portion over to them. But the 60% that are outside the corporate limits, we could sell them.
Okay.
You could sell, you know, you could sell portions of the power plant without impacting any FMPA rules or regulations. You know, you could sell one of the lift trucks. You could have an employee leave and go someplace else. You could sell a particular customer. You could sell a particular transformer bank. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't trigger any penalties, when it doesn't trigger any rules or regulations that we have to meet. So we could give them the 60%.
Well, as I understood, 100% of the city's customers were pledged against the city's portion of the FMPA bonds.
I don't think the customers were pledged. I think the revenue was pledged.
Well,
it's a revenue bond.
Right, so if you sold 99% of your customers...
Yeah, but we're not.
Right.
We're selling 60%, and there's still certainly enough revenue coming in to guarantee any bond payments.
Well, so there's a possibility, assuming the sale stays on its current track and FPL negotiates with FMPA and AUC, what discretion, what I'm trying to get at here is what discretion you think the council has to approve or not approve the changes that are going to be needed to the contract. And I ask that question because it's an issue in the campaign. One candidate is positioning herself, Tracy Carroll, as the only candidate among the five who's going to be willing to make the contract changes that would be necessary to close the deal. And others have said that the council doesn't even have that discretion. If those contract changes don't impact the city financially, the council has no obligation, no alternative but to approve those contract changes.
Well,
How do you see that?
Certainly they have an alternative. If it's a change to the contract, city council could vote it down. I mean, yes, they could. To say that they couldn't is bizarre. Of course they could.
What would be the consequence?
However, I think the consequence of deciding to do that, unless there was something in the change that that would merit that kind of a vote, I think that the FP&L would ask for specific performance on the terms of the contracts that we've already entered into. So I don't really see where there's a lot of wiggle room in terms of getting out of the contract. But that's one of the reasons why I'm suggesting we do this, go forward with the sale now. And it eliminates the wiggle room, and it eliminates, and you know, in a sense, it gives everybody what they want. Because the city's still in the utility business, so those people that want the employees over there cranking up those generators, they get that. The employees don't go anyplace other than to their job every day. Everybody really kind of gets what they want. The county customers are free with FP&L. They're getting FP&L rates. I mean, everybody gets what they want. And why city council members won't even make a motion for discussion? We need people on the city council that have backbone enough and have the ability to see through some of these.
That would be a fundamental change in the contract.
How?
Well, that's not the way the contract is currently written, so it would be a fundamental change in the
How
contract.
is it not the way we're going with all of the terms that are in the contract? And
Well,
FP&L is going to show good faith that they want to go forward with the contract.
So my question was, how does FPL get what they want?
They are getting what they want. They're getting 60% of the customers immediately that are deeded over to them. They're getting 100% of the customers in that the accounting function, right? The money will go to them. The bills will be their bills. And FP&L gets what they want. The county customers get what they want. And we're still in the electric utility business until such time as those hurdles are taken care of and those.
And what if they cannot be? Then where would you be?
Well, where you would be at the end of the day, if at some time in the future you couldn't get over those hurdles, then the city would be in the electric utility business within the corporate limits and not affecting people that don't have a vote. There'd be no taxation without representation issue. There'd be no county people deciding that, geez, they can't vote for council members that are making decisions that affect their electric rates. None of that would exist anymore. And you would have a city that was self-contained, and if the city residents at that point didn't want to be in the electric business, then they've still got an electric utility that they can sell. But I don't see FP&L as backing out on the other 40%. I think they want the whole thing. I don't see it as a problem. It might take a couple of years to do it. Okay, fine. In the meantime, our utility is up and running right now. In the meantime, they wind up with the up and utility and they can send a manager in to do whatever changes that they see that are necessary for for them to run the plant in an efficient way.
Well, some argued last year before the contract was signed that the best way to go forward was to negotiate a partial sale and then attempt to sell the remaining 40% as issues could be worked out with the FMPA. But
And my plan essentially would give them what they want too,
no one on the pro-sell side seemed to be open to that.
because they wanted it all.
One of the arguments is that I've heard is that one of FPL's objectives is to find the way for a city like Vero Beach to exit its FMPA contracts because they'd like to acquire other utilities across the state.
And we can be working on those details after the exchange of some money and after deeding over those customers that are outside the corporate limits.
So what else are you hearing that's concerning voters?
Well, I think that you listen to some of the other candidates and they're concerned about the quality of life, and they'll come back and say, my quality of life is not going to improve one bit until my electric bill goes down. You know what I mean? And it's the same. It doesn't make any difference what issue you talk to. You talk to them about the lagoon. You want to solve the lagoon, the first thing that you need to do is you need to solve the electric problem. We'll have $20 million more in the community each and every single year. If you solve the electric problem, we'll have some money to throw at
What role do you think the city, what do you think the city government, what role could the city government play in addressing the lagoon issues?
Well, I think some of the things we've already addressed. The Kilroys, for an example, you can't solve the problem unless you know exactly where the problem is, and some of the problems are easy to see. It's easy to see when the state and the federal government flushes Lake Okeechobee into the Indian River. You can see from a satellite the problem. You can see the filthy water when they start that flushing routine. You can see the filthy water go out and kind of head south before it mixes and mingles with the Gulf Stream coming north right at us. You know, I think that government would like to have the homeowner on the aisles or the homeowner on the beach hook up to the central sewer system because they seem to think that they're the problem. Well, when you've got the federal government, when you flush Lake Okeechobee and you flush billions of gallons worth of filthy, dirty water into the lagoon, and then you come up and you want to blame the problem on somebody who flushes a 10-gallon toilet?
What you're
Give me a
describing,
break.
the flushing of Lake Okeechobee is clearly contributing to, if not the major cause of the problem farther south of
But
Stewart.
it's not just Lake Okeechobee. When when you drain the swamp, you forgot that you're going to be up to your neck in alligator sooner or later, and that's what we did here in Indian River County. We drained the swamp. Everything on the other side of the Florida Ridge. When Flagler came in and built his railroad, he built the railroad up on top of the Florida Ridge. Why do you do that? Keep it out of the flood. Keep it out of the water. And then what we did, because we saw because real estate developers and lots of people saw that wetland out west of the Florida Ridge as prime development land. All we got to do is drain it.
We're not talking about west of I-95. We're talking about west of 27th Avenue and 43rd Avenue. Much of that used to be underwater.
West of the railroad tracks. That's the Florida Ridge. Yeah, not out the other side of 95.
Well, let me ask you this question.
But stop dumping all of that water into the lagoon. Stop trashing the lagoon.
If more Kilroys are deployed within the city of Vero Beach and in Indian River County, and if the science reveals that the human waste is a significant cause,
then we can fix it. We'll know what it is.
And how would you see the city addressing the septic tank issue if it's identified as a major cause of the problem?
You know, back, and this is, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and there was some concern. And I looked at the studies to see where the problem areas were. And one of the problem areas was at the city marina. And the problem with the city marina is you had boats moored out there that were flushing.
Now, they've got that under control now.
Well, what they did, in fact, I was on city council, this is back in 2009. I was on council at the time, and we did do something to somewhat resolve the problem, in that the city marina bought a pump and some tanking and some equipment where they could go out to these boats that were moored out there and empty the tanks. So some of the problem has been resolved.
But what else are you hearing from voters, Brian?
I'm hearing that they want Heady back on council because Heady was the only one that had backbone enough to stand up to people and say out loud what other people were thinking.
Nobody's accused you of not being willing to do that.
No one has ever accused me of not speaking my mind. You know, and I get accused, well, I'm not civil. Well, you know what? Just disagreeing with someone doesn't mean that you're not civil. And they don't like my tone of voice? Oh my gosh, really? Really? Out of everything that you heard, it's my tone that you don't like? you know? Don't buy my albums. What can I tell you? You know?
That used
You
to
don't
be
want to
a-
hear me sing. All right, you don't like my tone, but you know, I think that what we really do need on council is we need council members that are willing to listen. We clearly don't have that. I mean, they'll have you. I mean, it's back to what it was 10 years ago when they had the police haul you out.
There are 2 seats open on the council.
There are.
Which of those 2 do you most want to replace, or does it matter to you?
Oh, it's clearly Tracy Carroll. I think she's the worst offender in terms of citizens' rights. She's obnoxious to citizens. She's awful. She's rude. You know, Dick Winger at least is not rude.
Beyond those personality traits, if you will, are there position issues where you differ?
Well, that's a position. That's not just a personality trait.
I'm not
It's a
minimizing
position.
it. I'm just
It's
wanting to
a
explore.
position that they've taken that the Constitution doesn't seem to mean anything to them anymore. That our rights as citizens to tell them representatives. They're representatives. They work for us.
I guess what I wanted to explore with you is, and I didn't say it specifically, positions that she's taken regarding, for example, cuts in services or other positions that she's taken and decisions the council has made.
Well, you know, cuts in services. If you talk to taxpayers, you talk to somebody that's paying the bill. Do they want their taxes cut? Absolutely. So there are some members of the board that have taken and they do this benchmarking routine, and you know, they say, oh well, Stewart only has so many employees per people or per population, and they do these comparisons. But if you look deeper into the comparisons, all of these cities that they want to be like, some of them don't have a beach. Some of them don't have the kinds of parks. Some of them have a tax base, they have a tax rate lower than us, but their tax base is 3 times ours. So, you know, this whole benchmarking routine, I think that I would much rather go in and look at the departments and see whether or not the departments were doing everything that they could to run an efficient department. They did.
In his book on leaders, Nixon spoke about wilderness years, the time out of office for people who had lost re-election and spent that time learning and growing or developing different interests. You ran for re-election 2 years ago and were not re-elected. So I'm curious, you know, over the last 2 years, how you've reflected on that. Would you have done anything differently? What would you do differently?
Well, I was told that the reason I wasn't re-elected was because in the final days before the election, I spent that time in Haiti. And I have been committed over several years to some projects in Haiti, and as a volunteer. And I worked down there, and I had a trip scheduled that had other people on it, and I was the trip leader, and there was no way that I was going to cancel it. And I'm told that because I wasn't out waving signs, that's why I missed by what? Less than 100 votes, I forget what
It was close.
But yeah, but I think that there are certainly a fair share of voters out there that appreciated what I did when I was on council, and they'd like to see more of that. And so we'll see whether or not. I think that after November 5th, I'll be back.
What to you is unique or special, if anything, about this community, and what role should city government play in maintaining that?
Well, I think the reason most people from the north come here is because of the climate. And I think that city council probably doesn't have a whole lot to do and or say about the weather.
Do you think it's important to maintain the city's existing height restrictions?
You know, people really get uptight about the height restrictions, and they raise these terrible pictures of high rises blocking the ocean as you drive over the bridge.
Which is what we see to the south of us.
And I think one of the things that that people see in their mind's eye is different than what really ever could happen. For an example, I'm a native New Yorker. What's the average building height in New York City? A wild guess.
600 feet?
I mean, stories. How many stories?
Oh, 60?
60 stories. And if you ask 100 people, that's the answer that you're going to get 90% of the time. Average building height, New York City, 5 stories. 5 stories. And if you look at our
In the whole
building-
city or on the island of Manhattan?
in the city, but
Well-
even in Manhattan. My kid brother, his studio is in Lower Manhattan.
Well, so you're speaking of the extremes, like...
Oh, no, because you can look at Manhattan too. And I don't know the statistics
So would you be
on
open?
Manhattan.
Would you be open to a change in the city's height restriction?
Depends on what the offer was. You know, if somebody's coming in here with an offer that they're going to build something that would really help the community out, and they were going to be 5 stories and going to be 3 feet over the height restriction, would I grant them a variance? Absolutely. If it were really going to help the city, increase the tax base, provide some jobs, do I care about 3 feet or 10 feet? No, I really don't. I really don't. But am I...
variances to the height restriction are different from lifting the height restriction.
Yeah, lift them now.
I didn't think you meant to say that.
Denied the variance, this goes back probably 10, 15 years, they denied the variance to Trinity Episcopal Church over on Pine for their bell tower. So what they did was they built a bell tower on the ground instead of on top of the church. You drive by Trinity Episcopal, you'll see the bell tower out in the middle of the front yard.
I think in any church building project, a designated gift for a bell tower is kind of the last thing the minister is hoping for. There's so much else to be paid for. But at any rate, that's a little off the subject. So what's your message to voters here as we come up on an election?
Vote for anybody you want, give me your second vote.
You're willing to play second fiddle, so to speak?
Give me your second vote. Well, actually, if everybody said, okay, look, I'm going to vote for whoever their particular candidate is, and I'm going to give Heady the second vote. At the end of the day, at the end of election day, I would have more votes than anybody else.
Sure.
I'd be the number one.
Second votes counts as much as the first vote.
Well, not only does it count, but your total vote count.
Right,
If you were
that's what
getting everyone's second vote,
That's what I mean.
your total vote count would make you the highest vote getter in the election. And that doesn't mean that more people wanted you as their number one. It's just political math, that's all.
Well, it will be interesting to see how it turns out. There have been a couple of online polls which are hardly scientific and I think are not even close to what the actual vote will be, but it's still been interesting to watch them.
Well, it is, but if you, and you can do this, you can go online and look at the polls and then go back in history and look at the online polls and see what their success rate was.
Well, it's just a straw poll. It's kind of like the Iowa caucus, or not even the caucus, but the straw poll before the caucus. There's nothing scientific about the sampling there. Well, Brian, thank you for coming in this
You're so
evening.
welcome.
I appreciate your time. Wish you well.
Thank you, sir.